Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking hands and gloves for Jedi Master Plo Koon. So let's go. So on the face of it, these might look quite complicated and difficult to do. So basically we're doing a hand prosthetic, but it's actually really easy. To get the base item for this costume piece, we have to cross franchises a little bit. We have to go to Harry Potter, and these actually Dobby Hands. The Dobby the house elf, they make these really large three-fingered gloves, and although they're not perfect, they're actually really good as a base for Plo Koon's hands. So they are obviously the wrong colour, so we're going to have to paint them, but then, yeah, other than that, it's just modding to suit our needs. Now painting latex can be a bit tricky, so what I did is did some research on the subject, and I found that if you mix liquid latex with just regular paint, acrylic paint, or in this case house paint because it's a lot cheaper, you can actually get it to stick to latex and it won't peel off. So I mixed liquid latex, this is the one I used, with regular house paint. I went and got some Testapox mixed up in the colours that I thought. This one's a nice deep orange. But I mix it up. You use about 70% latex to about 30% paint. The latex dries mostly clear, it's slightly off-white, but it's not noticeable in this colour. So you mix about 70-30 and it just sticks to the latex really well. I actually ended up doing a couple of different coats of colours on this before I decided on just going for the straight orange. I tried to build up some colours to do the weathering for the deep grooves in dark colours, but that really didn't work very well, so I just ended up coating it in that orange completely. Then to do the detailing, I just whacked out my airbrush. Once you got that base layer of latex down, doing thin layers of airbrush really won't affect it. Unless you go on really thick, it will then crack, but doing things like this is really fine. I mixed up more of a pinky colour, then went in and did the details on the hands and added some shading and added some details around the fingernails and in the grooves of the fingers. After that, the only thing I really did to these was to trim them up. I found they were a bit too long and were interfering with other parts of the costume that I had around the wrist, so I decided just to chop off the bottom. This is really simple, and I just cut it off with some scissors. Next is the gloves. Now obviously finding three-fingered gloves in this size is incredibly difficult, and you'd probably have to have it custom made, so there obviously isn't anything around for that. But what I saw someone do on the Rebel Legion doing their costume is buy the costume Darth Vader gloves. Now these are just pleather gloves made for the cheap costume for Darth Vader. I ordered the largest size they had, but it's still a bit snug. But basically with these, all you do is cut off the fingers and then make sure everything's not going to unravel, but then stitch together the two middle fingers. So the middle and the ring finger get stitched together to make one big opening for that middle finger. Now the cutting off is really easy, just done with scissors. The only time consuming bit is just getting a needle and thread and sewing those bits together. I did use some super glue to help hold the ends together. This really helps, as some of the stitching can come undone pretty easily with the constant on and off of the glove. But these tuck up into the other parts of the costume, so they work really well. The last thing I had to do for the hands was to do a bit of sculpting work. This is arguably the most difficult thing that I had to do for the hands, and it's making his talons on his middle finger. He has a long talon. It's kind of like an Art Nouveau sculpture. You can see from the reference it's quite detailed, and my sculpting skill isn't enough to go that detailed. I didn't want to spend so much time making it super accurate. I started off making a paper template. This was really easy. I just guessed about the size that I needed. There's some really good reference I found online for this. I cut it out of paper, then cut my base out of styrene. This is a sheet plastic. It's really easy to use. I just, in fact, used scissors to cut it out, and then just cleaned everything up with a file. This gave me my base shape. This was then heated and shaped with a heat gun just to give it that curve that the talon has. Everything was then covered in Warbler. I used black Warbler because that's what I have. It's really good. It's got a really nice surface to it. I covered the front and back and then could begin sculpting the details on the top. I marked out my design with a white pencil. This is a Chinagraph pencil, so it's really good. It's quite an oily pencil, but I found it really shows up and stays on the black Warbler. Once I'd roughed out the design, I started sculpting. I just use really simple clay sculpting tools on there. All you do is you heat up the Warbler and then just push in the detail to get your pattern. You can then add other little bits to start sculpting some of the shapes on. And I just worked on it for a little while till I had the kind of shape that I wanted. Now to prime these for paint, I just covered them in a wood glue. This is a PVA glue, but it's quite a strong PVA glue. It's quite thick, but it really seals the warbler and gives a really smooth finish to paint on. Now in the reference, they are a bronze colour. I didn't have a bronze, so I decided to mix up a copper and a brown. This gave me an okay base coat to start with. I ended up then doing a wash of black to get in all the grooves. It's actually brought them down to a much nicer brown that I liked a lot better. Then just to add a little bit of that weathering detail, I put in a pale blue. This is like a pale bluey greeny colour, but this went on in a really thin wash to get in all the grooves to simulate some of the oxidation that can happen on bronze things. And then just to finish it off, I used some Goldfinger. The whole thing wasn't quite shining as much as I wanted it to, and it was quite brown, so I used that Goldfinger on the top quite sparingly on all the edges, and it gave it a really nice metallic shine over the top. So that's it guys, I hope you enjoyed this look at how I made the hands and gloves for my Plo Koon build. It's coming along great. There's a few other bits we've got to do on the hands. We're going to be covering the gauntlets a little bit later on. Those are quite fun. Just got to finish those up. Please stay tuned to see the rest of this build. It's all coming along very nicely. And I will, of course, see you in the next video. Until then, take care. Bye bye.